G'day folks, it's Phil from 15 Minute Guitar Practice here. Now you may have noticed, if you're a subscriber, that I haven't really been around much for the past 12 months. And truth be told, I've been busy. And what I've been up to is writing, recording, and releasing my own original material. So today, I'm not going to be teaching anything, but what I'd like to do is share with you the origin story of my first single, I Can't Stop Myself From Loving You. A kind of VH1 behind the music, if you're old enough to remember that kind of thing. So let's get into it. Here's what I remember. It was September the 4th, 2022, which is Father's Day here in New Zealand. And at some point in the night, a gift was given to me. That's all I can say. Some point in the night, a gift was given to me. This gift was a dream, not a visual dream, but a sonic dream. In this dream or this experience, I dreamt an entire song. I dreamt the melody, I dreamt the bass groove, I dreamt the drums, I dreamt the hook, all these things. So I woke up on Father's Day morning, my children going, Happy Father's Day. It was about 7 a.m. and I had to say to them, guys, I've got this thing in my head and I really need 45 minutes to just get it down, get it captured, because it feels really good and I'm scared I might lose it. You're going to call me crazy, but you hear lots of songwriters say the song wrote itself. I didn't write the song, I channeled the song. And my experience over the last kind of 18 months has really made me a believer in that. The first thing I needed to do was to establish a tempo for what I was hearing in my head. So I just went to, I think, all8.com, which is a kind of tap tempo metronome thing where you tap the keyboard to the time of something and it will tell you what BPM is. And I needed that so I could open my GarageBand session and start. Once that was done, the most prominent thing I was hearing, unusually for me, was the bass line and the groove. It sounded like this. Then on the back of that came the guitar part. It wasn't particularly complex, but it was played in that kind of funky Nile Rodgers chic type thing. It started off as E minor 7 to F sharp minor 7 to B, just 3 chords played in a loop. And that got me close to what I was hearing, but it wasn't quite right. So I sat with it for a while and made some tweaks. The first tweak I made was to the B chord, because the B chord is the last chord in the sequence. I changed that to a B7 just to give it a kind of 5 to 1 cadence. So that was close, but there was still something I felt was missing. What I found was the missing piece was this D sharp diminished chord in the final measure, which would lead back nicely into the E minor 7 chord. That's what I was after. And I made one final tweak, not to the harmonic structure of the chords, but to the rhythmic placement of the chords. The bass and drums were really pushing the 1. So I pushed the guitar part to start on the and after 1. Then onto the vocals. I already had the vocal hook in my head and the melody, but it was so high that I couldn't really sing it. But ultimately, I knew I wasn't going to sing the song, so that was less important. Ordinarily, I would change the key, but so new was this experience of this song entity visiting me from the ether, I didn't want to change anything for fear of losing it all.
I can't stop the way of loving you. I can't stop myself from loving you.
Such was the sense of urgency for me to capture this while I could, that when I came to record the vocal, I accidentally sang the wrong lyrics. The first line originally was, I can't stop the way I'm loving you. And then the second time I sang it, I sang, I can't stop myself from loving you. And I mention this now because later on, it becomes a problem. So setting up this groove, the vocal, the piano, the guitar, the bass, the lyrics, and the melody, it took less than an hour. And then I realized that I had to build a verse and tell a story, because that's what you do with songs. And the interesting thing was the verses took a few weeks, and I tried a few iterations, and I was not happy with version 1 of the chord progression, nor version 2. I made some adjustments. It felt better, but it still didn't feel like it landed. Version 3 of the verse was the one I finally landed on. My boy actually gave his endorsement on version 3. I thought version 3 was good, and when he did, I was like, well, that's good enough for me. What I liked about what I came up with was I knew there had to be a departure from the chorus, and I knew that then had to be some kind of interesting interaction between the chorus and the verse. And I landed on this kind of 2-part verse, which the first part goes down and the second part goes up. Usually your chords would just follow the same movement. So with those parts done, I knew that it needed a middle 8, or some people call it the bridge. The middle 8 for me is the part that comes usually after the second chorus, which is a harmonic departure from what you've heard up to that point. If you've written a song in a major key, a very common motif is to then move the song to its relative minor, so you have that contrast of major and minor. I was already in a minor key, so I did the opposite and moved to E minor's relative major of G major. So with the demo finished, I felt that this was a song worthy of actually being released into the world. I've written many songs in my life, and most of them, I'll be honest, are sitting on my hard drive in GarageBand because I just haven't taken that final step of getting them out there. So over the course of a couple of months, I asked a few friends about recommendations for a producer, and I made a few phone calls and I connected with a few people. Ultimately, most of those came to nothing. But one person I spoke to seemed to be exactly my kind of guy. However, when we spoke, he was about to leave for the States for 6 months. So I kind of thought, well, this was dead in the water for the time being. But about 3 or 4 months later, I saw a post that he was back in the country, and so I hit him up immediately. So I spoke to this guy for probably about half an hour. We had a great conversation and we covered many things. But after that conversation, I really felt like this was the dude to help me make this happen. We shared a lot of common values, a lot of common beliefs about music. He had a great musical pedigree, and the studio that he had was set up as a one-stop shop for people just like me. And the thing for me, I was coming from a place of insecurity and also ignorance, because every other time I've recorded anything in my life, I've been in a band, there's been 4 or 5 people, we rehearse the song, and we go into the studio and we put it down. I had never been in a situation where there was just me and a crappy old garage band demo. He told me not to worry. He was a multi-instrumentalist, and man, he really was. He was a Berklee graduate. He played drums, he played bass, he played guitar, he sang, he played keys, and he had a great ear. So we got started in the January of 2023. So one of the first things he said to me was, look, this is a great track, but it's sitting right now in the 70s. It's 70s disco funk, it's chic, it's Earth, Wind and Fire. Our job here is to make it more R&B, it's to make it sound more contemporary, and to make it sound like it's influenced by those artists, not lifted from them. So we started by rebuilding the track from scratch. I re-recorded my guitar parts, and he did everything else. There was a lot of toing and froing with him and me, trying different parts, him singing things to me and say, try this, and me trying it. And what we were doing was basically throwing stuff at the wall and seeing which parts would feel right. He was very clear that not all of this stuff was going to be used in the final mix. Maybe none of it was going to be used, but the idea, while the spirit was inflamed with inspiration, to just go with it. And so we did. My favorite thing after leaving that first session that he came up with was the opening melody, which is a hook in itself, and I just love it to bits. As we got deeper into the session and we kind of finished up with the instrumentation, the producer asked me whether I was open to a female vocal, because what we had created did seem to lend itself to the kind of disco divas era. I was open to anything at that point because things were going so well. He called a vocalist that I had seen perform, and she is one of my favorite singers, and she's so massively talented. He didn't know that I knew her, and he also didn't know that I'd seen her and thought years ago, if there was a way I could work with this artist, I would be incredibly blessed. I was like, oh, yeah, I've heard of her. I tried to play it really cool. And he was like, look, I'm just going to phone her. I'm going to play the track down the phone and ask her if she's interested. I can't make any promises, but, I like people to kind of react to the vibe. And if it feels good for them, it's going to feel good when they get here. And he was right. Keshia came in, did the vocals, blew me away. Not gonna lie, I was a little bit starstruck. I was just like, she's so good.
Stop myself from loving you. I couldn't stop myself if I wanted to.
Remember, at the beginning of this video, I said that when I was doing the demo, I just accidentally sang 2 different lines for the chorus. This was the point it became a problem. I accidentally got them mixed up, and she sang these choruses, and then she sang the harmonies to these choruses, and that was a lot of time, and I was like, oh shit. guys, you're going to hate me, but we need to do that all again. And they were like, oh, what's wrong? Was the performance not good? And I was like, no, the performance was amazing, but I've just given you the wrong lyrics. He also asked if I was open to rewriting some of the lyrics. And I was. I felt the songwriting in the verse wasn't that great. But the parts for me that were really good, the chorus was great, and I felt the middle eight was also lyrically pretty strong. And he suggested a writing session. For me, that was a little bit new to me. I'd never really collaborated with other people when I write my songs. But in the end, as you'll find out, I fully recommend it. Collaboration means that there are people who bring their own flavor to your music, and best of all, there are things that come out of those sessions that you would have never come up with by yourself. So in this writing session, there was Keshia, the singer, Dre, the producer, Lucy, his writing partner, and me. And we were there to write the verse. The question was, if the chorus was, I can't stop myself from loving you, what was the backstory? Who was that person? Why were they saying it? And how did they arrive there? I came up with the first line, not the romantic type. And for 25 excruciating minutes, nobody had anything. And I began to feel like my dollars were ticking away and I was going to end up with nothing for that session. But again, I think you have to trust the process. You have to trust the people around you and their talent. And it's not all going to come out beautifully, epically, and continuously. So after 26 minutes, things started to flow. But I remember at the 25-minute mark asking whether I'd written a first line that we could actually use. Other things we added here was the very bouncy pre-chorus. I think I came up with the tongue-tied lyric, and it was going to be tongue-tied and then followed by something else. But I liked the way the ba-ba-ba-ba-ba bounced. So I said, let's repeat that. So we ended up with tongue-tied twice.
Not usually tongue-tied, tongue-tied. I'm usually all mine, but you make me feel nice, real nice. I'ma lay it all on the line.
So that was cool. We built this story of this woman who's usually very composed, very in touch with herself, very connected with her feelings, and she's not usually the romantic type. She doesn't usually go in for that kind of thing. But in this story, she is experiencing a connection with somebody and she's trying to figure out what the hell is going on. She is on this journey of, first of all, kind of not really admitting it to herself and then basically giving in to her feelings. And that's how we arrive at the chorus. Another thing we changed was the middle eight lyric, but only slightly. The middle eight lyric was good, and I actually felt that apart from the hook, the middle eight lyric was the next strongest part of the song. But what I did was just to slightly adjust some of the lyrics. So it again came to a resolution.
Love's possibility.
Yeah.
Young heart searching for a sign.
I love everything you did on Young Hearts Woman.
Young heart.
Young hearts.
Okay.
Maybe a fall.
Young heart searching for a sign.
After all the vocals and things were pretty much done, I was listening to the track and I knew that moving from the middle eight into the final kind of outro choruses needed to be extended. And so I called Dre and I said, we need more here. And I think he kind of thought I meant an additional bunch of stuff. But what I actually meant was we need to extend this just to kind of leave it hanging on that chord for longer than it is now to build the anticipation. And I remember it being very late in the piece that I made that call. As the sessions had gone on, I found my voice, I was feeling more confident, I was able to express myself and my opinions more readily, and I knew with my gut that this needed to happen. So we went back and we did exactly that, and it turns out to be my favorite part of the song, because that meant we were able to do a build and stack the vocals. Keshia did this beautiful line where she just sang this really long note, and then we stacked a harmony on top of that note. But that stacked harmony didn't begin immediately. It began a bit later than that one, and then we stacked a third one on top of that, and that one also came in a little bit later. So we had this like ba 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 ba, just like a gorgeous, beautiful fanfare. I still marvel at the track. I mean, it's been released 7 or 8 months ago now, and it still gives me the feels big time. I'm so proud of it. So once the song was mixed, I was again deep into figuring out, how do I release the song? Like, I knew nothing about getting it on Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or anywhere else. So I had a bit of figuring out to do. The producer's well seasoned in that respect. So he gave me a few pointers, gave me a few choices, and eventually found my way. So the track was ready to release, and then he threw a spanner in the works. And he pulled me aside and said, dude, you can't just release this track. I said, well, what do you mean? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this, to release the track. He says, dude, you can't just release it. No one's going to notice it. No one's going to be aware of it. You know how many songs are released and uploaded every day? You need to do a release event. And I was coming from I don't have a band. I don't know who to call. I was all about, the glass half empty kind of stuff. And he just shrugged and he was like, you'll figure it out. And he left me like that, as if to say, bro, you're a big boy. You could make this happen. I ain't doing it for you. And I appreciate him doing that. Not maybe in that moment, but as things turned out. There was 6 weeks before the release. In the end, I locked in a drummer, a guy I had worked with before, and I asked this guy who used to play bass in a band of mine, but now plays keys, to play keys, and he declined. And I was really quite gutted with that, because keys, they're quite significant in this track and the other tracks we were going to do. But long story short, I phoned around, I called a few older friends, called a few people from further away, and one guy's like nearly an hour away from me, and he took the keys. I re-asked my friend who declined the keys job if he'd play the bass, because he knew most of the songs on bass anyway, and so thankful that he agreed, because, he didn't really have to do much work, he knew the songs. And so a band was put together, and on the 29th of June, we launched the single, and we launched a single with a great show, and I had the time of my life, and so did the crowd. Here's a clip. that is the story of I Can't Stop Myself From Loving You. Please follow the link to Spotify or Bandcamp. Have a listen to yourself. It doesn't have many monthly listeners. And I know here on this YouTube channel, I have around 5,000 subscribers. So even if 10% of you went and listened to that track and added it and saved it, then I would deeply appreciate that. And I also deeply appreciate you sticking with me when I haven't really been that present. So that's all from me today. If you've liked this content, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't liked this content, give me a thumbs down. If you didn't watch it to the end, I understand, because this is not an 8-minute video. This is Phil from 15 Minute Guitar Practice saying bye for now. Cheers.